It was a bright sunrise on a world far, far away. Now this world was similar to the overworld, but also different, as the water was different, the sky was different, even the animals were different. But the general structure of the land was the same. However, the most significant difference about this world was the abundance of players, as they flourished in this land, building cozy homes and villages and farms. They just thrived as a civilization here. Now, they mainly lived in small pockets across the forests, with each family building their own unique home to fit the environment. And the focus of this story is on one of those small families, as they lived in a birch forest in a small wooden bunker. It was a pleasant place to live, and it was very private, surrounded by the abundant wildlife. There was Steve, and even the young Steve. Yes, they were all called Steve. Now, the young Steve was also typically referred to as Little 44, because, well, he just loved to eat 44 subscribe buttons during each meal. And so Steve, and Steve were all happy with their lives. But it was on that bright sunrise that mail arrived. It was a book. Steve looked at Steve. They had to go do something because of what was written in that book. And so Steve told Steve to stay in their house and to not leave under any circumstances until both Steve and Steve returned. And with that, Steve set off into the wilderness. Now left alone, young Steve wandered around the house for a while before he jumped up and down on the beds, played some music, and even ran around in circles throughout the house. But after a few hours, he got bored of that. And so he did the one thing that he was told not to do. He went outside. But to begin with, all was fine. He was just playing in the small carrot farm, having the best time of his life. He loved the carrots. But soon it began to rain, as a thunderstorm had materialized from nothing. Now, Steve knew that he should probably get back inside. I mean, it was a literal thunderstorm. He would be foolish to stay outside. However, at the same time, he loved the rain. Found it so fascinating, and so he decided not to go back and to instead head out into the wilderness so that he could experience even more of the rain. And he was just looking around, mesmerized by the magical rain, when a bolt of lightning struck him. Steve miraculously woke up. He was still alive. For some reason there was this goat, and it was feeding Steve notch apples. And that saved him. But as soon as Steve began to move, the goat ran away. This was odd. But anyways, Steve knew that he should definitely return back to his home now. Steve probably wouldn't be too happy if they learned that Steve didn't follow their instructions. And so he began to run back to his home when he noticed something. The air felt off. It just didn't feel right. And so Steve began to look around to try and figure out why that was, when he saw that the sky was starting to crack open. Oh no. The world was ending, and this missing corruption began to seep through the gap. Well, that can't be good. And so Steve began to sprint as fast as he possibly could to get back home. He needed to return. But suddenly a voice began to whisper to him. He stopped running. Where was it coming from?
They're almost dead, and they aren't in that hut. There is no safety there. But if you wish to save them, and the entire world at that, well, you must touch the corruption within the clouds. It is the only way.
Steve was scared. Why was there a voice talking to him from nothing? But he was just a young Steve child, and so he believed the voice without question. He had to save them, and the entire world. It was his responsibility. And so he ran back into his house, grabbed all the dirt and stone that were in the barrels, and he began to build straight up. The storm was intensifying by that time, with cracks of lightning reverberating through the sky. But still he persisted. He had to do this. He was the hero that the world needed. Screams soon began to echo across the land. The souls of this world were suffering, for the end was near. But no, he couldn't give up. The world needed him, and so he kept on building higher and higher and higher, getting closer to that cloud. The screams were intensifying. The corruption from the sky was only growing. But at last, he reached the levels of the clouds, and so he leant out to touch it, when...
You are safe, young one. You are safe.
After a few minutes, Steve began to regain vision. But he rather quickly realized that he was falling, and he was doing so in this strange new land. Just a few seconds later, he collided into this world. This place was different, as this was the overworld. And so Steve began to look around at this new world, and as he wandered around, he felt different. He was stronger, and faster, and better, and taller? He was right by an ocean, and so he wanted to see what his appearance was, given this great change that he felt. And so, he wandered over to the water, and so he looked down at his reflection at this oddly coloured ocean. He was shocked by what he saw. He was an adult Steve now, even though no time had passed, and his mind was just so young. But also, more importantly, half his form was enveloped in a missing corruption swirl, and his eyes were wide open, and they glowed with raw power.
Your body was almost dead. I'm the god of our old world. Our souls share what is left of you.
Steve was confused. What was happening? Who was actually speaking to him? There was no way that a god was inhabiting his form. That was just ridiculous. And so he began to run away, trying to get away from that voice and all this craziness. But as he ran, he was going super fast. That was strange. That shouldn't be possible for him. Next, he tried to mine a tree, just to try and get his mind off things. But he was able to do that in mere seconds, as he had haste somehow.
Our souls are intertwined. You have my godly powers, and I have your form. Together, we shall be eternal.
The corrupted Steve was confused. He didn't want this. He just wanted to go back to his home and play in the carrot farm. So defeated by these events, he began to cry. But as he did that, a dark fog surrounded him. The world's ambience reflected his emotions. He was a demigod now, and the world was under his influence. No, this was wrong. All wrong. He shouldn't be suffering through all this. He shouldn't be in this world. And he definitely shouldn't be a demigod. He wanted to go home, but he couldn't. And so anger began to boil within his heart, and thus he began to stomp around in rage. He just wanted this all to be over and to go home. Now those jumps were so powerful that they destabilized the world, and they sent shockwaves throughout the land. The overworld couldn't handle the sudden burst of power, and thus everything was destroyed, and all life was killed. It was just him, angry and confused, floating there in the void.
No, not yet.
Oh no. The voice was back, and in the next second, everything was back to normal. All life that was killed was revived, and the world just went on as if nothing had happened. This was weird. No, he hated this. That God was clearly a part of him. How else would this have been possible? But he just didn't understand it, and so he yelled out,
Why? Why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to me?
Our world is being corrupted, and you were the final player alive. I needed you. But together, we can get our revenge on the one who caused all this. We are one now, and there is nothing that you can do about it. We can win this, together.
No, he didn't like that, and so he started to run once more, dashing across the land before he hid in a cave. He hated the fact that he was just some sort of exploit for a god to use. He felt oddly betrayed. He didn't want to get any revenge. He simply just wanted his old life back. And so he just stood there, seething with rage. But eventually he realized that this godly voice inside him, well, He was probably telling the truth. His homeworld was likely gone now. The corruption was only growing when he left, and there was that terrible storm, and so everyone that he ever knew was likely dead now. He was all alone. Well, with the exception of just that god that shared his form. And there was going to be nothing that he could do to change that. So, he wasn't Steve anymore. He was... actually, who was he really? He thought back through his life. What made him... him? And two things stood out to him. Those being those 44 subscribe buttons that he'd love to eat for each meal, and this exploited godly state that he was now in. And so he combined those two ideas, and he gave himself the name EXPLOIT44. He accepted that this was his life now, and finally, he calmed down and was at peace.
Good. You have finally accepted it. We are one team for now, and for all of time itself. So, let's do this. We have a mission to complete. Do as I say, and we will succeed. Now we must hide with the souls of the suffering. It won't be able to find us. While we do that, we need more time. It's coming for us.
And so EXPLOIT44 used his godly powers to summon a lightning bolt, and using the site that he had just built, he had activated an ancient ritual. And he was transformed into a soul. His omnipotent soul would then hide where all other suffering souls exist, within the overworld. The ominous vaults. They were safe now. But to understand what happened next, you first need to learn why the ominous vaults exist, and how the ominous bottles came into this world. It's vital to know about that, to fully understand the next quest of EXPLOIT44. And so to do that, you'll need to watch this video.